I've always been a curious person and someone who wanted to know things, who wanted to get deep into the nature of things. I guess you could say that made me a seeker of truth. In my early childhood, I was raised around religion. Not to say that I grew up in any kind of a strict religious background, but my family is kind of conventional thinkers. This is what you do because how we were taught. It was go along to get along type of mentality. In bringing me up into a traditional religious faith, namely Catholicism, I took on a worldview that was very fearful and was definitely one of mental control, as I consider that all religions generally are, and that's what they're there for. Unfortunately, during my early teens, I had no frame of reference to understand organized religion in the sense that I do now as astrotheology, because this was a topic that I had no knowledge of and no other researchers at that time had ever brought that body of work to my attention. What you could say happened is the feelings that I had for being deceived into that worldview of fear and that worldview of deception, as I considered it, is that turned to feelings of resentment and rage. In that state of emotions, I attempted to find the exact antithesis of those ideologies and worldviews. And that pushed me into looking into the world of the occult. When people hear that word, there's a lot of negative connotations that come with it, and there's a lot of misconceptions that come with it. The word occult is derived from the Latin noun oculus, meaning eye. And the word occult itself comes from the Latin verb occultare, which means hidden from sight or veiled to the eye. So all occult means is hidden from plain sight, not easily seen, something that has been obscured. And that's what this body of knowledge is. It's knowledge that has been taken out of the general circulation of humanity, and it has been held or reserved for the elect few who have access to that knowledge. I went into what would be considered the dark aspects of the occult, meaning keeping knowledge for one's selfish usages and as a power differential over other people who have been deprived of that same knowledge, because ultimately all the knowledge of the occult is about the aspects of the human psyche. It is actually knowledge of ourselves and how we function and what our primary motivations and those types of factors are within the human individual. I got involved in groups like the Church of Satan, the Church of Lucifer, the Order of the Evil Eye, among many other dark occult organizations. I was actually appointed a priest within the Church of Satan in the 1990s by Anton LaVey himself before he passed away, I believe in 1997. The worldview that I had back then was extremely dark. It was based upon controlling other people, gaining knowledge to use as influence and a mechanism of control over others, then partnering with other people in order to expand upon that knowledge and use it in a more effective way. That's what these occult organizations are about. And I call them psychological filtration centers for people who are actually psychopathic. These are the tendencies that they're looking for. People who are self-focused and don't really care about what they're doing to others. So they can groom them and bring them up into positions of power. Because as I found out through working with these organizations, it's not just isolated individuals. It's people who are connected in just about every institutionalized area of modern life. Politics, law, business, finance, education, medicine, you name it. The networks that they have in place are extensive, and these are the types of individuals I would see at meetings, rituals, etc. So when I started to understand not only what drove me into that arena, which was feelings of resentment, anger, rage at having been lied to, but I also began understanding that this was much larger than what I had originally envisioned it as. This was really the fundamental core ideology, Satanism and dark occultism, that lies behind all of the institutions of power and influence that really make up modern day life and modern society. Once I started to understand that it was all about control and it was about injecting this poisonous worldview, which was more poisonous than even a fundamentalist religious worldview, there's a third side. There's a middle ground that is actually deals with the truth about reality and the natural law, but not having had any access to that general framework through people's dedicated research that I had not encountered up to that point, I bought into this poisonous worldview because it is based upon three basic ideologies, three core tenets. That is moral relativism, the idea that there is no such thing as right and wrong. We get to make it up based on our personal likes and preferences, and it's all relative. What's good for us is good. What's bad for us is bad. What's good for us is bad for someone else, then, hey, go for it, because it doesn't matter what happens to them. Again, it's a very psychopathic worldview. The second tenet is social Darwinism. The idea of the survival of the most ruthless, not necessarily the most humane or the most fit in consciousness, anything like that. It's just whoever can get a leg up on the other person and exploit that differential, go for it, because that's what's going to make you strong and that's what's going to make you survive. So it's that idea of self-preservation above all else, social Darwinism. And the third is something that a lot of people want to ignore. It's something painful that we need to take a look at that has existed throughout human history. And it's something that is one of the core ideologies that runs throughout the world of the dark occult, and that is eugenics. These are individuals who believe that they are superior to other people and that they have ultimately, like a god, the right who gets to live and procreate and who does not. And it's something that forms a basic foundational core ideology of the entire belief system of dark occultism, particularly Satanism and dark Luciferianism. So that's where my background came from, in understanding what those systems of poisoned worldview and ideologies are all about, and how they're attempting to inject that worldview into other people so that they create a total control system based on fear, but most of all based on differential knowledge. In other words, those in the know with knowledge controlling other people who lack the knowledge of the human psyche and the knowledge of self, who have no frame of reference, no ability to defend themselves against these types of attacks and mind control methodologies which they use against them, because they have been kept from the knowledge that those manipulators have had all along. It's a perfect dialectic. It's dialectical mechanics, a mind control technique. You're putting forward something that is ridiculous, the worldview of modern organized religious beliefs and practices, something that people will often see through upon reaching the age of reason and understand that it's farcical and it's there to control human behavior, but most of all to control human perception, to put perception into a small box, a cubicle, and say anything outside of this little cubicle, this little box is off limits for human consumption, for human mental digestion. You don't even look there. Because after all, they're not really teachable. They're just there to be controlled and to be exploited like animals. This system works very effectively because it's like giving the child who doesn't really want to eat their vegetables saying, oh, you have a choice. Would you like mashed potatoes or would you like peas today? And they think that they're making the choice, but really the entire thing is controlled because the parent just wanted them to eat a vegetable regardless of which one they chose with the meal. But giving them that illusion of choice makes them feel like they have some kind of power and they have some kind of a decision about their destiny, when in fact they're being pushed in a similar direction, which is either be a controlled individual or be a controller. Either way, you're playing the game of control. It is an interconnected and labyrinthine network that really takes a lot of study in and of itself, even to understand how some of these interconnections take place. The Church of Satan is quite low on that totem pole, in my estimation, from what I've seen, because it simply acts as a psychopathic filtration system at a low level that interacts with the general public in order to bring individuals that they identify as psychopathic up through their ranks and groom them for inclusion in organizations and think tanks at lower levels that then feed up into what I would consider the globalist hierarchy of control. That's what the Church of Satan is actually there for. It's to find the people in society who would maybe ordinarily slip through the cracks and they would not be able to exploit and use their talents and capabilities for their ends, and then to bring them up through those ranks and to groom them for helping them conduct their agenda at a higher level. I have often been quoted as saying, until we de-occult this knowledge, in other words, until the knowledge of the occult is no longer occult, until it is brought out into the light of day, and these manipulation techniques are known, and this information has been turned into common sense knowledge, humanity will never be free. We cannot ignore the information of the occult because we think, oh, it's negative. It isn't negative. It's information about how the universe works, how natural law functions, how the human psyche functions, and then it's what we do with that knowledge that makes it either good or bad. Right. So the usage determines whether it's used for order and goodness and propagating freedom throughout society, or whether it's used as a weapon for power, differential advantage, and then creating all kinds of chaos, disorder, and ultimately evil with it. So we look at both the positive aspects of human consciousness, and we need to look at the negative. We need to understand the methods of mind control and the ideologies that these people believe in. That's not negative to look at that in an attempt to understand it, because once we understand it, then we're in a position to do something about it. We definitely need to understand the dynamic of human psychopathy. If we don't understand psychopathy, we're missing a gigantic piece of the puzzle as to why the world has been worked into the condition that it currently exists in. Psychopathy is a genetic disorder. It's something that results in a being that is born without the ability to empathize with any other being. It's like an amputee who doesn't have hands. He can't type on a keyboard, not because he may not want to, but because he doesn't have the capacity to, because he no longer has hands. That's what we're talking about. And therefore, to be accepted at all, at any level, by other individuals who would see this as a monstrous condition, and indeed, in many ways, it is a monstrous condition. In order to get along with other people in society or pretend to get along with them, they have to mimic the range of human emotions which they don't have. So they become very good actors. They become very good at influencing other people, at manipulating, because they realize that's the only way that they're going to be accepted at any level in society, because they don't have any feelings for any of their actions, what the consequences of any of their actions are toward other individuals. And that's psychopathy. Unfortunately, there's a secondary form of psychopathy that is learned, or I shouldn't even say learned, it is instilled by conditions. The conditioning aspects of what our environment dictates, the current environmental conditions in which we are living. So the mental influence of other people can influence secondary psychopathy. Actual mind control techniques that are willfully directed against other individuals can influence secondary psychopathy. Training techniques like outcome-based education or military or police training can induce secondary psychopathy. Secondary psychopathy is a form of a learned behavior that is dependent upon the environmental conditions in which a being is dwelling. And unless those conditions are changed, it's very difficult for an individual in a state of secondary psychopathy to heal the imbalances that are done to the human brain, because ultimately what this condition of secondary psychopathy does is it destabilizes the neocortical functions of the human brain, which govern compassion and reason. And therefore the person cannot engage in true logical thinking. They can't engage in any real compassion because those parts of the brain are malfunctioning. It is a form of a brain disorder. Many more people than just genetic psychopaths, we've worked ourselves into a position of not caring. And many people try to numb the full range of human emotions out because they realize how uncomfortable the world that we live in happens to be at the current time in history, and they don't want to feel their emotions. So they get hooked on things like SSRI, antidepressant medications, and they're numbing their emotions out by an act of their own choice, which is a dangerous thing to do. I do believe that not with genetic psychopaths, it is not possible to teach them. They literally have the part of them that empathizes. It is not present. So to waste time on a true psychopath is pointless. But secondary psychopathy can be cured if the person is put into somewhat healthy surroundings, meaning healthy mental influences. And over time, the worldview can be shifted and it can be reversed. It can be a painstaking process, and it is one that the individual at some level of their being would have to have some form of desire or will to carry out. Again, if someone's completely resistant and they've totally given over their mind and totally given over their personal responsibility to change and grow, it would be very difficult to even take a secondary psychopath out of that condition. But if the person has an inkling to truly want to do the right thing, not to just do what they've been taught or what they've been commanded, people can be brought out of the condition with care and attention. They can be brought out of the condition of secondary psychopathy.
This is Jeff Bird, and you're listening to Radio Mysterium. Today we're going to look at some Illuminati movie symbolism. Let's jump right in. This is from the new Star Trek movie Into Darkness, and over Spock's shoulder there you can see the 9 embedded in the 11. You can see the 2 towers and the 9 inside, subtle 9/11 reference there. Then on a scene with a photon torpedo you can see CF6660. So there's a little embedded signature from the Illuminati right there for you. I'm not religious, but they are, and they put this in every chance they get. At the end of this movie, it said March 22nd, which is 322, which is Skull and Bones Society, and the spring solstice. They are also giving you their signature, which is a Heil with the hand up, and the single eye symbolism, which is another Illuminati giveaway. Here you'll notice the Masonic floor and the pyramids from the top view. If you look over Will Smith's shoulder there, you'll see the pyramid from the top. Also notice the black and white symbolism of the suit as well. Here you'll see those pyramids from the top again with a clock that says 9/11. Notice the paper the man is holding there from Men in Black 3. It says a control post moon, which is interesting if you think about the hollow moon theory, or possibly what Stanley Kubrick was trying to communicate in 2001: A Space Odyssey, with frequencies coming from the moon to change our perception of reality. And they included this visual from the moon to give us an example of what the dark side of the moon could look like. Yes, it's simply a top view of a baseball field, but if you look closely, you'll see the Masonic compass and rule. Men in Black 3, brought to you by the Freemasons. Here's a scene from Despicable Me, and the girl with the hat is throwing the devil horns there. Again, not coming from a religious perspective, just showing you their signature. They like to throw those 666s in there, the devil horns, and upside down crosses, and whatever they can get away with to show you that they're in charge. Here's the diamond, which is a reference to 33. A triangle is 3. Another triangle is 3. There's 33. Also, there's what looks like a G in the middle of the compass and rule, hinting at that geometry. And this is the logo they use on all of the zippers and the clothes and pretty much throughout the entire movie of Despicable Me and Despicable Me 2. Once again, it's Despicable Me, brought to you by the Freemasons. This is interesting. You can almost see a McDonald's theme here with the M and the red and the yellow on the shirt. Usually anytime you see M or W, it's a reference to the Masons. I know a Satanist who owns a series of black houses. They're all totally blacked out, and they're in the midst of neighborhoods, just like this. So this is a reference to underground Satanism. And of course, he's trying to steal the moon in this movie, another reference to the moon. Here's another scene from Despicable Me, and of course the girl, if you look closely, is wearing an owl, which is a reference to Lilith or Semiramis, and the owl is also a subtle reference to the Bohemian Grove and the rituals of sacrifice that take place there. Here's a short scene from Iron Man 3, and who does that look like? Yep, and the plot is about a terrorist who is really a phony and an agent or just an actor, and he's working for the system. Iron Man 3 also has a great deal of symbolism and predictive programming around mind control and drones as well. Then also this shot right here that says MK42. Not only is 42 a very occult number, but you see the ever-present MK, which refers to mind control, K being the German K. But the more recognizable reference here is MK Ultra. You can see another MK reference here with a machine that looks like a mind control machine, and you see the letters MK right there. And here's the main character of the movie Epic, and her name is MK, Mary Catherine, but she goes by MK, and they make a point of that over and over in the film. If you look closely, you'll also see an owl, a reference to Bohemian Grove and the Semiramis figure, and also a butterfly, which is referencing Monarch programming and MK Ultra. And these are unicorns, I'll give you that. But even for unicorns, that's pretty scantily dressed right there for a kid's show. Interesting. And then there's an apple, the universal symbol of temptation, on the desk there. Notice he's making the 666 with his fingers. This is also a reference to mind control and a trigger, a well-known trigger for mind control and hypnosis. And if it happened once in the film, you might think, okay, literally. But you'll see it here again, and again, and again. A little more subtle version here. And here's the same character making a not-so-subtle reference to the Illuminati here, flashing what amounts to an Illuminati gang sign here. And this is interesting. Here's the supposed good guy but ends up being a bad guy. You'll see a vest that looks like a beehive once again, and he's pointing to it and saying submit. So a little bit of hypnosis there for you in your kids' movie. Family friendly, right? And by the way, the beehive is a universal symbol pointing to hierarchy and the elite, basically laughing at the worker bees. It's also represented by hexagrams. And here's another scene from Partly Cloudy Chance of Meatballs 2, and you're seeing the whole plot about genetically modified food. A very universal trigger is the rainbow, especially the Wizard of Oz symbology. You have 4 rainbows here. Now here's a whistleblowing element showing the people how to interpret and read hidden symbols actually within the film itself. This is showing backward masking, which is another technique they use all the time. Words written backwards or anagrams. In this case, you'll see a man discovering that the logo for this Apple-like company is live. And then if you turn it around, it's evil. So they're actually showing you. Here's a scene from The Dark Knight Rises, and you'll see a very Masonic numerology there, 1133. 11 being the 2 towers of Joachim and Boaz, or a reference to 9/11 and those 2 towers, and then 33, a reference to the 33rd degree of Freemasonry. And this was the last tick on the clock before the scene ended. So it was the prominent numbers that they wanted you to see. Another scene from Batman. This is even more provocative. You'll see Sandy Hook and the words strike zone. And this is a map of Gotham, but with all the shootings referencing the Joker and even the Boston Marathon bombing that references Joe Carr. You'll see a lot of Batman and Dark Knight symbolism in these false flag events. This is Monster High, which is an extremely Illuminati mind control cartoon that is targeted toward young women. Here's another example of the dollification of young women. Here's a picture from Monsters High, and it looks like an Eyes Wide Shut party, veritably. The Masonic black and white checkered floor in a huge Rothschild-looking mansion. It looks like a scene from Eyes Wide Shut, actually. I'm not here to be a moralist, and I'm not claiming to be right about all of these symbols, but you have to admit there's quite a few in here that seem awfully suggestive. Here's another Monster High picture with the owl prominently displayed. Here's another reference to the owl from a kid's cartoon called Gravity Falls. It's a Disney show. Disney is heavily entrenched and involved in this mind control and also Illuminati symbolism. And look at the carpet or the rug that the kids are walking on in Gravity Falls. You'll see the all-seeing eye in the pyramid. You'll also see the man behind the counter wearing a Shriner's fez, which is, of course, a Masonic reference to the 32nd or 33rd degree of Freemasonry. Here's more references to the all-seeing eye from Monsters University. And here's another M in the logo. You'll see them everywhere. W's and M's you'll see. And again, W is just an upside-down M. They use the backward masking thing. They do this all the time. You'll see the triangles below, which is referencing 33. You'll see the M, which is referencing Mason, and you'll see the all-seeing eye in the logo itself. And finally, I'll leave you with this, another reference to 33 and the triangles embedded in the roof there. And you'll see we scare because we care, which is also an allusion to the fact that they use fear as their greatest control. Ordo ab chaos, which is order out of chaos. So this is just some of the symbolism that I found in various movies, kids' movies, and also full-length feature Hollywood films. And keep your eyes peeled because they hide it in plain sight, my friends. This is Jeff Bird with Radio Mysterium.
While the history surrounding FDR's administration is disturbing, there is said to be a darker level, and one that is openly satanic, in the design of the dollar bill. These allegations begin with a group founded in Bavaria in 1776, known as the Illuminati. The order was founded by a man named Adam Weishaupt, with the alleged purpose of perfecting society.
The symbolism of the dollar bill, Adam Weishaupt, do you really think it has anything to do with the Illuminati, in your opinion?
Is the Illuminati to be defined as Freemasons and Rosicrucians and other secret society members? If that's the case, then yes, I believe the symbol on the dollar bill, the truncated pyramid, is directly related to the Illuminati, because Roerich was the Illuminati.
In the 18th century, the original order was thought to have a bloodthirsty agenda, and it was believed that they secretly worshiped Lucifer. George Washington warned about the Illuminati in his letters, while Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin were thought to be members of its inner circle. Which brings us to our next speaker. He claims to have been raised in a modern Illuminati family that dates back to the 1700s. He says that, as a child, he was made to practice black magic and witchcraft. His name is Doc Marquis.
My family goes back into the Illuminati all the way back to 1789.
Of course, we have no way of either confirming or denying Doc's claims, but it is worth noting that he has acted as an expert on the occult for law enforcement and the FBI. According to his publisher, in the past he has appeared on and consulted for Geraldo Rivera and Oprah Winfrey, and for shows like Hard Copy, Inside Edition, and Unsolved Mysteries. Doc has been a Christian since 1979, but he says that part of his upbringing in a family that worshiped Lucifer was to be taught about the secret Illuminati symbols of the dollar bill, and that understanding them begins with the Rothschild dynasty.
Meyer Amschel Rothschild had made a very interesting and profound statement. He said, "Allow me to control and issue the money of a nation, and I care not who writes its laws." And he was right.
Meyer Amschel Rothschild is called the founding father of international finance. In 2005, Forbes magazine ranked him 7th on their list of the 20 most influential businessmen of all time.
All this happened back in 1776, and this was during May 1st and shortly thereafter. The significance behind that is that on May 1st, 1776, Dr. Adam Weishaupt, who was a defunct Jesuit priest, who was given the chair of the professorship of religious studies at Ingolstadt University, was approached by Meyer Amschel Bauer, who would later change his last name to Rothschild, along with 12 of his most financially influential friends. They knew Weishaupt at that particular time was not only a genius when it came to the occult world, but Weishaupt also had an axe to grind, because it was the Catholic Church that just recently defrocked him. He was no longer a Jesuit priest, and he was going to send a message to them, to the monarchies of Europe, and to all other people who would try to have their will over his.
What Rothschild and Weishaupt came up with was a plan to destroy the old world system of government through monarchies and the church, and to set up a new world order in its place. This is said to be the great plan of all the secret societies.
So what happened? Meyer Amschel Bauer approached Weishaupt and basically told him, "We know you've got the occult knowledge and genius to put it all together. We've got the money. You do it, we'll back it." Just to paraphrase what really happened. So in 1773, Weishaupt started creating what had never been created before. The idea of Illuminism had always been around, ever since the days of Babylon, with the co-founders of being that Nimrod and Semiramis. But no one had ever been able to actualize it. However, May 1st, 1776, the Order of the Illuminati had become a reality under the auspices of Dr. Adam Weishaupt. Now, like other nations, orders, countries and such, they have their two great seals. The Order of the Illuminati does. Those two seals can be found on the back of a $1 bill. People mistake those to be the two great seals of the United States of America. They are not. Those are the two seals of the Order of the Illuminati. And I'm going to explain it to you. In order to understand the seal itself, we have to first take a look at every single thing that composites it. We look at the first part of it on our left, which would be the truncated pyramid one. Above it is a 13-letter Latin expression that says Annuit Corruptus. And directly underneath the base of the pyramid is a 3-word Latin expression, which is Novus Ordo Seclorum. If you were to look up the word, let's say, work, in the English dictionary, you're going to find at least 50 different meanings for it. It is the same thing in Latin. Different words have different meanings. They have more than one meaning. The word seclorum, one of the definitive meanings is secular. Something that is secular is of the world. So it is proper, very proper, to translate the bottom as New World Order, the Novus Ordo Seclorum. The whole of it is saying, announcing the birth of a new world order. This would be Dr. Adam Weishaupt himself, the very first head of the Order of the Illuminati. It was Weishaupt who had himself come up with a 7-part plan to create what he called the Novus Ordo Seclorum, or the New World Order. This is the person responsible for it. The interesting thing about the front of the dollar bill is that there are 4 huge ones. There is one in every single corner. Now, if we look at every single one of them, they each have an oval around it, except for the top right-hand one. Now, if we look at this blow-up version of it, you will find there's no oval. This is a shield that is surrounding the one. Now, the reason there was a shield here is because this is very similar to the original shield that was given to the Rothschild family when Baron Meyer Amschel Rothschild had become knighted in England and received the lordship. If we look across the top of this shield, all the way to the left-hand side, it drops down and forms a crescent moon. It's a crescent moon because it represents the female goddess in the occult world. At the bottom of that shield, of that lunar moon, you will see the owl. And it's very obvious. Once you take a good look at that part of the crescent moon, and it is the same Illuminati owl that is being worshipped at the Bohemian Grove in California by those members of the Bohemian Grove, where presidents, premiers, kings and queens and heads of nations throughout this world have met. You can tell just by looking at this photo, that is a 40-foot owl. It is made out of oak, and that the worshippers are surrounding that fire pit around that altar, which is easily reflected in the lake around them. This is definitely the owl of the Illuminati.
The rituals performed at the Bohemian Grove are occult and idolatrous. One of them, called the cremation of care, is supposed to be a mock human sacrifice, though some suggest that real killings take place. When President Nixon was there, he commented about the extreme homosexual environment at this all-male boys' club. Among other powerful American leaders who have been spotted at the Grove are Ronald Reagan, Dwight Eisenhower, Jimmy Carter, Newt Gingrich, and George Bush Jr. and Sr.
Now, when we take a look at the O, it is actually, occultically speaking, the shape of the Ouroboros, the snake that's going around in a circle, devouring itself. This O is actually the eye in this lady's face that they want to look at. This is the O. Now, what's in the center of this O? You take a good look. It is the exact same owl of the Illuminati that we saw on the back of the $1 bill. So the question then becomes, who owns L'Oreal?
But the owl seems to be a major symbol for the secret societies, as they are found repeatedly inside government buildings in Washington, D.C. And a giant owl figure is even seen in the street design, with the United States Capitol in the midst of it.
Now the Druids from the Gaelic means, Druid means men of oak. These people worshipped creation among other things, but their sacred symbol was the owl because the ancient god of magic and of the hunt was Pallas Athena. Her bird was the owl, and that owl represented wisdom. It always has.
Pallas Athena was also the goddess figure who was said to inspire Sir Francis Bacon. But now look at this owl seal at the Bohemian Grove, where it says, "Weaving spiders come not here." While the line is taken from Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream, could this also be a veiled reference to what seems like a spider web design that forms the background of the dollar bill? Are there additional secrets hidden there?
Now, I'm sure you've heard of a Rorschach smear, or the Rorschach ink blot test as created by Dr. Rorschach himself. You see the ink in the forefront and everything else is in the background. This way your subconscious mind is supposed to pick up on what's on the foreground, and you're supposed to be able to tell what you are subconsciously seeing. Notice how it's very busy. Lot of intersection diagonally lines. You can't make out what's there. But let's get rid of the background noise, get rid of all the diagonal lines that doesn't belong there, and let's reverse the principle of Rorschach and take what's in the background and bring it to the forefront and see what's there. Because once we do that, we find out it's quite obvious that there is another Illuminati owl, and that it is perched on something that looks like an arrow. That is what they don't want you to see. Once you see this owl here and compare it to the other one on the left-hand side of it, it becomes very obvious that this is an owl. You can now begin to distinguish beyond all that busy signals and such that they don't want you to look through. Yet, they place there in honor of their totem bird, the Owl of Wisdom, which is the totem bird because their god, Lucifer, was supposed to have been the wisest of all of God's creation. Wisdom of Lucifer, wisdom into the bird, wisdom into the word Illuminati. Therefore, the chain of wisdom is followed all the way through.
All right, now, did they teach you this in the Illuminati?
Yes. Well, I want you to understand that the first symbol is known as a pentalpha, from the Greek word for five, pente. It is a five-pointed star. Now, this next one is a pentacle. Now, it looks similar, but I want you to notice how it is interwoven. It runs through and in between itself. Now, this next symbol is what's known as the Star of David, the Mogan David, the Jewish Star, the Seal of Solomon. There's numbers for it. This is the symbol for the nation of Israel. Now, when you take a look at it very carefully, you will notice that it is two equilateral triangles that are interwoven. This shows the union of God with man. However, when you look at the next one, it's similar to it. It's known as a hexagon. This is when you take two equilateral triangles, place one on top of another. Symbolically speaking, you're placing man above God. Now, this next symbol is the foulest, the most evil of all symbols in the occult world. There is nothing that can even come close. It is known as the hexagram. It is the six-pointed star with a circle surrounding it. It is this symbol that must be used during high ceremonial magic or high ceremonial witchcraft when you are summoning up demons to this plane of existence.
The use of the hexagram is said by Doc to be very symbolic and seems to represent the occult concept of a Christ figure, just as the Maitreya was for Nicholas Roerich and Henry Wallace. But what Christ do they mean? Doc believes the pattern of hexagrams in the design of the dollar bill provides the clue.
If we take a look at the 13 stars directly above the head of the eagle and connect the dots, you will see where the very first hexagram is located. And if you notice that surrounding the hexagram is the 28 guidelines that make a circle. Now, inside every single point, the 6 points, is a star. There are 6 of them. They surround now the 7 stars. Remember, 6 is the number of man, 7 is the number of God. Now, it is man that is surrounding God or is placed above God.
If what Doc is saying is true, this could represent the person the Bible calls the man of sin, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped. Doc's interpretation seems to also fit the worship of Lucifer, for in the Bible, Lucifer declares that he will exalt his throne above the stars of God. Next, Doc claims a second hexagram can be found by connecting the various points where the much talked about number 13 is represented.
And don't try to tell me it's the 13 colonies.
There are 13 stars above the eagle's head, 13 stripes in the shield, 13 leaves on the olive branch, 13 arrows in the eagle's talon, and then 13 letters in the phrase E pluribus unum, which makes for 2 points on either side of the eagle's head, for the 6 points total of the hexagram.
If we take a close look at the same seal and connect all the 13 together, just like we did when we were kids, when we were playing that game, connect the dots, once we connect all the 13s, it becomes very apparent where the second hexagram can be found. In this one, which is very obvious, already comes with a circle around it.
So this is the second hexagram here in figure 2.
Yes.
And then where's the third hexagram?
The third hexagram can be found on the other part of the Great Seal. Again, connect all the 13 together, the 13 letters, the 13 steps in the pyramid, connect all this together. And you'll note, with the circle that's already there, it forms the third hexagram. In other words, a 6, a 6, and a 6. A 6, 6, 6.
Doc has deciphered a code that, if there, would glorify Lucifer's Messiah, whom the Bible calls the Beast or Antichrist. In the book of Revelation, it reads, "Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666." Could there really be 3 6-pointed hexagrams on the dollar bill?
Once we start at the base of the pyramid, which is the foundation of all things, and follow the design of the hexagram itself, you're going to find out something very startling. We go from the M and follow the symbol all the way up to the A. The A cuts directly underneath the eye of Lucifer all the way to the S. The S connects all the way down. It goes in between the V and the I and connects all the way to the O. And following the symbol, the O connects up and over along the symbol of the hexagram to the word N. In perfect sequence, it's M-A-S-O-N, Mason. It's not what a lot of other people have espoused, that the symbol connects down to the M in seclorum and that the word is an anagram or something like that. Those people who are doing that obviously don't know what they're talking about, or they don't know how to plagiarize me correctly. Because the order of the Illuminati have stated and always will state, this is perfectly spelled out to be M-A-S-O-N, Mason. This points conclusively that the Masons have been involved in the order of the Illuminati. This was back during the Council of Wilhelmsbad, which would have been July 16, 1782.
All right, so what are we seeing?
Now, if we look at the bottom one of the reverse side of the dollar bill, you'll see on the right-hand side that, again, there's a lot of busy intersecting diagonal lines. Yet, if we apply the same principle we just used to reveal the hidden hours of the Illuminati and apply it, we will find that there is now a skulled skull-faced winged demon. And it is very obvious, once you take away the background, the busy noise, it becomes very apparent what it is and that it's been there all along. And if we just simply go and enlarge that section, just start with a small one, and just keep enlarging it, and enlarge it even more, even with the background noise there, as I call it, I think it becomes very apparent what we are now looking at. That it is still a skull-faced winged demon. And it is these demons that are protecting and blessing the two great seals of the Order of the Illuminati. And it would make perfect sense that it had to be demons used to protect these seals, since I am convinced it was those same demons that handed them over to Thomas Jefferson when they first created them. I am convinced, beyond all doubt, that that indeed was a demon sent up from the bowels of hell, probably under the direct orders of Lucifer himself.
Doc Marquis makes it clear that he is no longer involved in the occult, and that since becoming a Christian, he has dedicated himself to warning others about the activities of the secret societies that worship Lucifer.
I've been doing this now since the late 70s, when I first left the Order of the Illuminati, and that's when at that point, I had become a born-again Christian. At that time, I realized what I had been doing all along. Maybe in my own way of trying to make up for what I had done, and I've done a lot of heinous things in this life, I begin to wonder if I'm not trying to make up or atone for some of those things I had done. And I know in my heart of hearts that as a born-again child of the King, my sins have already been bought and paid for. But still, there's just that part of me that still feels so guilty about everything I've done. So it could be in my own way, and I'm somewhat convinced that in my own way, I'm still trying to make up for all those crimes I was guilty of when I was in the Illuminati.
Doc makes it clear that he believes demonic forces were behind the design of the dollar bill and are working through secret societies. One of them is the Order of the Eastern Star, the female chapter of Freemasonry, whose icon is an inverted pentagram, a symbol associated with the satanic goat of Mendes. Ed Decker told us a story about a woman he once counseled who was involved in this society.
I got a call one day after I had published a book on it, and a little book called The Question of Freemasonry. And in that book, I had, on one page, is the actual goat of Mendes.
The goat of Mendes is a very significant symbol, since it was designed by 19th century French magician Eliphas Levi, without question the most influential occultist of the last 200 years. In his books, Levi glorified Lucifer and Satan, and his writings were quoted extensively by every major occult leader, including Albert Pike, Madame H.P. Blavatsky, and Manly P. Hall. Now listen carefully to Ed Decker's story.
I got a call from someplace back in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and this is years ago. And a lady called me up and she said, "I want to talk to you." She said, "I received a copy of your book. I am the head of the Eastern Star for my state." And she said, "Every time I go to another area of the state to do the induction of the leadership of the local chapters of the Eastern Star, I have these bad dreams, and it's like this demon comes in and attacks me in my bedroom, and it's this evil, evil thing. And it's beginning to bother me." And someone mentioned to me that, the Masons and the stuff that they do isn't really godly. You might want to study it a little bit. She said, so she told me that she went to a Christian bookstore and asked them if they had anything on the Eastern Star or Freemasonry. And the lady said, you know, in the mail, I had just gotten this booklet. It's called A Question of Freemasonry by this guy, Ed Decker. And she said, I opened the book, I opened it up to the page, it just opened to the page that you have the goat of Mindy's on there. And I looked at that, and that's the demon that's been coming into my room and attacking me when I'm going around the state and doing the inductions of the ladies of the Eastern Star. She said, I ran down 3 blocks to my husband's office, left my car right in the parking lot of the Christian bookstore, ran down there, got my husband out of his, I think he was an insurance agent or something, and said, look at this. They left there, went home, read the book, got on their knees, confessed it as sin, renounced it, and had that thing taken off their back. And from that time on, all that heaviness left her. When it went away, it just moved off her entire spirit. It was a spirit of darkness and evil. And it was the goat of Mindy's, the same thing that's on the Medal of Honor, the same thing that's built into the Capitol and the Mall and the White House, built in there. It's the same evil spirit.
This whole idea of the Messiah and its relation, and the Messiah's relationship to the stone, and who that Messiah would be, and what would happen when the stone is returned to Jerusalem, and when the temple is built, it would be a replica of the original Solomon temple, not the Ezekiel, account. Which is what most Jews believe, the Ezekiel account. No Jews believe that the Solomon's temple is going to be rebuilt in that architectural style. But the Masons believe, if I understand them right, that when that stone finds its way to Jerusalem, it's one of the last items necessary, and that there are certain rabbinical orders that I've met today that are anticipating its return. Once it returns, then they proceed with a blueprint to take the Temple Mount and put up what they consider to be the final temple that Ezekiel described. But the stone it's all pivotal upon the return of this stone, because Solomon brought that stone in the traditions and legends in Judaism into his original temple, and upon it the incense was burned in the fire pan.
According to Masonic author David Oveson, the word dollar comes from the German word Taler. While there are many Taler designs, one in particular is mentioned, with the image of Jesus Christ crucified on one side, while the reverse bears the image of a serpent on a cross, and a reference to the book of Numbers from the Old Testament. In this account, the children of Israel had complained against God. The scripture says, "And the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and much of the people of Israel died." When they repented, God commanded Moses to erect a bronze serpent upon a pole, saying that everyone that is bitten, when he looketh upon it, shall live. In the New Testament, Jesus made reference to the bronze serpent as a picture of his crucifixion. He said, "As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have eternal life." Some believe that the serpent cross is the original inspiration for the American dollar sign today. While the image of the bronze serpent holds a very particular meaning for Christianity, David Oveson explains that Kabbalists and alchemists find an interesting parallel in the Hebrew gematria. The Hebrew word for the serpent of Moses is Nakash, which means the shining one. The numerical gematria for Nakash is 358. This is also the numerical equivalent for the Hebrew word Mashiach, or Messiah. Oveson claims that these numerical equivalents allowed magicians to draw a connection between the brazen or bronze serpent and the Messiah. But exactly what Messiah do they mean? The phrase e pluribus unum, or out of many, one, appears in the banner held in the mouth of the American eagle. The word one appears a total of 7 times on the dollar bill. Oveson writes, in magical numerology, the number 7 is regarded with a special veneration. Certain texts that deal with the meanings of numbers insist that 7 stands for the complete temple. The temple he refers to is the ancient temple of God, built by King Solomon in the city of Jerusalem. Oveson goes on to say that the concept of a complete temple is symbolized by the unfinished pyramid of the Great Seal, where the symbol of a Messiah figure is also shown with the all-seeing eye, representing the capstone that will one day complete the pyramid. In other words, when the Messiah emerges, then will the temple be complete. But just who this Messiah will be is the subject of intense debate, and the clues to his identity are said to be related to the temple itself. The site of Solomon's original temple at the Temple Mount in Jerusalem is still considered a sacred and holy place.
Buildings are sacred in religions. Religious buildings are sacred. So Solomon's temple is sacred.
The Knights Templar were specifically named in reference to this ancient site. They were known as the Poor Knights of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon.
The Knights Templar lived on the Temple Mount. Today, the Temple Mount has on it the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque. The Knights Templar had their headquarters in Al-Aqsa Mosque when they were there. So the association between this arcane direction and tradition in Europe with the Knights Templar and the temple of the Temple Mount is direct.
The sacred nature of the temple was handed down from the Templars to the Freemasons, who are said to have originated from the ancient Knights. Masonic philosopher Albert Pike wrote that every Masonic lodge is a temple of religion. Another Masonic philosopher, Albert Mackey, wrote that of all the objects which constitute the Masonic science of symbolism, the most important, the most cherished by the Mason, and by far the most significant, is the Temple of Jerusalem. The spiritualizing of the temple is the first, the most prominent, and the most pervading of all the symbols of Freemasonry. Take from Freemasonry its dependence on the temple, and the system itself would at once decay and die. According to David Oveson, who is himself a Freemason, the dream of a rebuilt temple in Jerusalem is the true symbolism of the unfinished pyramid on the back of the dollar bill. But is it merely a coincidence that these symbols would end up on the foundation of America's currency? Is there a further connection with Solomon's temple and the mysterious Knights Templar?
The Templars were there on the Mount. They lived on the Mount. So they were living a dream. And the dream is the same dream Christopher Columbus had and wrote about extensively in returning to Jerusalem with the gold from the Americas to build the temple.
Was this the true purpose of Columbus's voyage, to finance the rebuilding of Solomon's temple? And was this desire handed down from the Templars to Columbus to modern Masonry? As we have shown before, the ships of Columbus sailed with a red cross on a white background, the symbol of the Knights Templar. But despite the interest of Templars and Freemasons, the original temple begins with the Jewish people.
The temple was critical to Judaism. It was the heart of Judaism.
The first Jewish temple, built by King Solomon, was destroyed by the Babylonians in 587 BC.
The temple became a necessity for the existence of Judaism. So when it was destroyed, the longing for another temple in the Babylonian exile was, primary.
The foundation for a second temple was laid by Zerubbabel when the first Jews returned from their captivity in ancient Babylon.
First thing, when Jews are able to return, they build a temple. There's Zerubbabel and Ezra and Nehemiah come together. There's a temple built. It's added on to over the centuries until you end up with Herod's temple.
This second temple was in existence during the time of Christ and the apostles. But it would also be destroyed, a terrible event that Jesus himself had prophesied. The scripture says that the disciples came to show Jesus the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said unto them, See ye not all of these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that its desolation is nigh. And so it came to pass that the second temple was destroyed with the fall of Jerusalem in 70 A.D. Yet in the aftermath of its terrible destruction would emerge the dream for a third temple, and what some believe will be the final temple of all time.
This arcane connection to Freemasonry has its roots in the longing for the temple, the longing for the final temple, for the ultimate temple where Hagoyim, where non-Jews pray with Jews, as the old books, the last old books of the Old Testament predict will happen. When does that temple get built?
The idea of a final temple is shared both by Jewish leaders and the Freemasons. Yet the two groups disagree on exactly what the final temple would be.
There is a common history here and a common longing. They'll never end up with the same temple. Jewish wishes for the final temple really don't resemble what Masons want to have built on the Temple Mount, which is a replica of Solomon's temple.
With their mysterious rituals and secret practices, the Masons are often accused of intoxicating the world, making it drunk with ideas of a new age and a new world order, all of which are engineered toward the fulfillment of the new Atlantis envisioned by Sir Francis Bacon. Could it be that this is what lies behind the concept of a third and final temple?
It, to me, makes perfect sense that the new Atlantis, as understood in the Baconian tradition, involves the final temple, the spiritual headquarters, if you will, of the new Atlantis. The idea of that temple is central to Freemasonry, the Knights Templar, and of this there is no doubt. They've all expressed it. All these arcane societies have let it be known that this is really ultimately a central goal. They seem to all gravitate toward there being a temple, a need for a temple, except Orthodox Muslims who say, no, we're the last religion. These buildings are fine, thank you very much. Become a Muslim and you can pray in them and hang out on the Temple Mount, which is not going to happen. So that leads to a pretty ugly likelihood. If people who want a temple get their way, there's going to be a bloodbath there.
Also, I believe it's spiritual because Satan has always desired God's place. That's why in Masonry you have Jebulon right there on the altar, Baal, the ruler of demons, in the Masonic altar. And Masons are generally, obviously, being deceived. However, right there on the Temple Mount in Israel, you have the Dome of the Rock, and the Golden Dome, the Black Dome, and within these domes you have statements right there on Israel's Temple Mount, statements that Allah is God, and Allah has no, or God has no son, and Muhammad's his prophet. A denial of the true God and his Son, Jesus Christ. And again, that's what 1 John identifies as being the spirit of Antichrist, those that deny the Father and the Son, 1 John chapter 2. And that's a harbinger of the ultimate Antichrist to come, who's going to sit in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So isn't it interesting? Here we have Benjamin Krim speaking of a coming Maitreya, who will rule as the coming Imam Mahdi of Islam. Of course, he can't really rule, and there can't be world peace unless the Jews, in his mind, are annihilated. And by the way, according to Muslim teachings in the Hadiths, when the Imam Mahdi comes, or when the Messiah comes, he will destroy the Jews and the people of the cross. So all of this stuff, incredibly, it fits together just too well. But praise God, because from my perspective as a Christian, Jesus Christ said, when you see these things beginning to take place, lift up your head, for redemption is drawing near. And I believe these are signs that Jesus Christ is coming again. And when he does come, he will defeat the Antichrist, and every knee will bow, and every tongue confess, including Benjamin Krim, including the leaders of Iran and Hezbollah and so forth. Whether it's in heaven or on earth or in hell, every knee will bow, declaring that Jesus Christ is Lord in the end.
And what will all these things mean for the future destiny of America? According to David Oveson, it was Manly Hall who influenced the placement of 72 stones on the Great Pyramid of the dollar bill, since the number 72 is said to be a magical number in the occult. It was also Hall who taught that the American eagle was a cleverly disguised phoenix bird. In his writings, he documents this account from the 1st century A.D. There is a certain bird which is called a phoenix, and when the time of its dissolution draws near that it must die, it builds itself a nest. But as the flesh decays, a certain kind of worm is produced. According to this account, it is from this worm that the phoenix is reborn. This concept of a phoenix worm in its nest seems to be represented at the top of this column on a building found in Europe. But in Washington, D.C., up at the tops of the 72 columns of the National Archives building, we find nearly identical carvings, all perched beneath the throne of destiny itself. Could this somehow be a veiled reference to the secret destiny of America? Watching the strength of the American dollar decline, we consider America's founder, George Washington. Around his image on the face of the dollar is said to be an omega symbol, signifying the end. But what end? Many researchers have come to believe that the plan of these Luciferian societies is that, like the phoenix of old, the America that we know will ultimately be destroyed, and that from her ashes will be born a new world order.